Hello, everybody. I'm Howie Hawkins. I'm running for president. I'm the Green Party candidate. I have the Socialist Party nomination. And with my running mate, Angela Walker, we've just been endorsed by Socialist Alternative, International Socialist Group, and the Colorado Springs and Salt Lake chapters of Democratic Socialists of America, which is one of our objectives, is to try to build more unity on the independent left. So that's good progress this week. Meanwhile, the Democrats have been fighting to get us off the ballot, suppressing the vote. Most of our voters wouldn't come out and vote. We know from 2016 exit polls that Jill Stein's voters, 61% said they wouldn't have come out to vote if she wasn't on the ballot. So we know what the Republicans are doing. They're trying hard to suppress the vote, but the Democrats suppress the vote when they suppress the Green Party. So another reason to vote Green. So we're in court now in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, Angela's home state. The Democrats know who they're trying to knock off the ballot. A black woman from Milwaukee that ran against crazy Dave Clark, sheriff of Milwaukee. You know, the cowboy hat wearing, Trump loving guy that was saying, don't call 911, get a gun, as sheriff. And Angela brought some sanity as an independent socialist, got 20% of the vote. Maybe that's why the Democrats are scared. So anyway, it's been busy. We're still fighting. There's still 3 more petitions due on Friday. And that's what it's all about, at least this last week of trying to get on the ballot. So Angela, why don't you say a few words before we introduce our guest?
Hey, y'all. I'm excited about Tennessee. We are on the ballot in Tennessee. I am concerned about my home state. I know that the individual who currently occupies the White House is in Kenosha. And the most recent statement that I read before we started the stream is about him saying radical agitation or something like that. Same strategy they used to use in the segregated South. I have a lot of concerns. So for my folks who are in Wisconsin, who are on the ground in Kenosha, handling your business, as we said last week, I want y'all to take care of yourselves, look out for yourselves, look out for each other, because the okay for folks to come in and be aggressive to you is coming from the top. And I'm very angry about that, and I'm very concerned about that.
So we have a special guest today. One of the goals of this campaign is to support our down ballot candidates. And we have from Connecticut, Justin Paglino, who's running for Congress as the Green Party candidate in Connecticut. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Howie. Hi, Angela.
About your campaign.
Sure. Well, I am running for U.S. Congress, and I am an MD PhD. I have recently joined the Green Party after losing a lot of faith in the Democratic Party, unfortunately, and come to believe that we really do need an independent left that votes left. Otherwise, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party just keeps getting taken for granted. So unless we show the party that we're willing to vote independently and go somewhere with our vote, I think our policies will always be taken for granted. And I also like to talk about ranked choice voting, because I like to let people know that with ranked choice voting, we could avoid the spoiler effect. We could have as many parties, as many independent candidates as anyone's interested in supporting, not have to worry about splitting the vote, throwing away votes, et cetera, et cetera. One of my top issue that I'm really running on is Medicare for all. I believe healthcare is something that we all deserve. It's a moral imperative that we provide universal healthcare here in America, and there's really no excuse not to, because we can absolutely afford to. Most of the studies that have looked at the question show that it'll be less expensive. Let me just check, make sure everybody can hear me. Am I coming through on the audio?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So Medicare for all is a policy that will save money, be up to 15% less expensive. But that expense would be a public expense instead of a private expense. But there'd be no cost to the consumer, out of pocket premiums, deductibles, copays, all of that would be a thing of the past, and instead we would have a public financing of healthcare. I personally favor a progressive income tax for just about everything that needs to be funded, and that's how I would prefer to see Medicare for all funded. There are some, there's taxes such as the payroll tax are actually kind of a regressive tax, that the one that we use to fund Social Security and so on. Anyway, so just to clarify, I am running for U.S. Congress in Connecticut in the 3rd Congressional District, which is New Haven and about 24 surrounding towns. It's the seat currently held by Rosa DeLauro, who's been in office for 30 years. She's a Democrat. She does not support Medicare for all. The bill, Pramila Jayapal's bill, has been in Congress since February of 2019 and has not made it out of committee despite having 118 co-sponsors. And my representative, Rosa DeLauro, she's not one of the co-sponsors, but I would be. So I'm doing this because, if people want Medicare for all, they have to be able to vote for it. And I've heard, Howie, I've heard you say, and I thought it was very true. It really resonated with me. If you want something, you have to vote for it. I almost feel like that has become the spirit of my campaign slogan. If you want something, you have to vote for it, because once you've voted, you've given up all your leverage. You can vote for somebody, and if they say, I'm not gonna do this right now, but maybe later, they're never gonna do it, because once they've got your vote, they've really got everything they need out of you. And right?
Yes.
So if you want something, you have to vote for it, So people can vote for me now. I'm gonna be on the ballot. It was very hard getting on the ballot. I appreciate all the work that that people have been doing all across the country to get you guys, Howie and Angela, on the ballot in different states, because it is really not easy. And I appreciate the volunteers that worked, especially this year in terms of COVID. There's not a lot of outdoor gatherings happening where you can go up and talk to people. A lot of hours in parking lots in the hot summer heat. It has been very difficult. But I'm very passionate about what I'm doing. I'm really excited that I can give people the opportunity to vote for Medicare for all, for a ban on fracking, which is something I think we urgently need to do to finally make some real impact on lowering our carbon emissions, because the climate crisis is a real and serious threat. Federal jobs guarantee, something else that I'm really believe in. FDR put people to work. Make the federal government the employer of last resort, so to speak. If people can't find a job in the private sector, there's lots of work to be done. Put people to work, fixing our crumbling infrastructure, greening our infrastructure, building solar farms, building wind farms. There's lots of work that needs to be done that's going to be a win-win if we put people to work doing it. That's where I am on a lot of the major issues. Well, also on war and peace, I've been, ever since, the Iraq war was a wake-up call for me and a lot of people that, our foreign policy is out of control. You look into the history of it, it's been out of control for quite a while. We've really been involved in a lot more conflicts than we need to be. And I think a lot of them are motivated by economic interests, sad to say. And so I advocate, demilitarizing our foreign policy and making peace the number one goal of our foreign policy. And I think we'll all benefit from that, and we'll live in a more peaceful, stable world. So, the Pentagon budget's out of control. It's up to $740 billion this year. Again, Rosa DeLauro, my representative, she voted for the $740 billion. She voted against the Pocan Amendment, which was an amendment to the defense bill that would have cut spending by just 10%. But even that is too much of a cut for Representative DeLauro to stomach. So that amendment didn't pass. So there's a lot of money that we could be using to address Americans' needs, providing federal job guarantee, providing health care, increasing the minimum wage, providing universal pre-K, providing free college. We could really be doing a better job providing for the American people and catering less to the special interests that are really guiding policy. I don't know if I don't know how this. I'm not familiar with this format. Do we have any questions coming in, or do we know what?
Yes, I'm actually looking in the chat. You're getting congratulations on running a tremendous campaign. There's a couple of folks lifting you up for that.
Oh, I see now.
Okay.
I see. I was looking at the. I was looking in the wrong column here. Okay.
And Mabel Clark is asking, do you support a ban on disposable plastics?
Yeah, so plastics, we need to get away from plastic. I think about it all the time, that I go to the store and I look for packaging. I look for products in packaging that I know I'm not going to have to worry about throwing away the plastic, I try to recycle all the plastic I can, but we know that, our plastic recycling stream is backed up. China won't take our plastic anymore. China about a year ago or so said, we can't take any more of this plastic to recycle anymore. So yes, we need to do something to find alternatives to plastic. Maybe plant-based alternatives. There's a lot more of these that are current technology that is a much better alternative for the environment, because yet these plastics are problematic. They can carry chemicals in them because their plastic is hydrophobic, and it can carry some hydrophobic chemicals in it that can get actually into the food stream. It can be concentrated in the food stream, and plastic breaks down into microplastics, gets into the ocean, it's eaten by the fish, and so on and so on, and things get concentrated on and up the food stream to the point where we're not sure what we're being exposed to. But you look at in people's bloodstreams, some studies that have been done, you can find all kinds of strange chemicals and plastics at low levels in people's bodies because of it's making its way into our food supply, and that's just very, very concerning. And so, that's just one example of what happens if you let special interests kind of dictate policy in Washington. There's money to be made by polluting, and unless the people speak up and say we don't want these pollutants in our food supply, that's what's going to happen. So yes, we need to do everything we can to reduce the accumulation of plastics. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch is swirling around out there in the middle of the Pacific. It's I think the size of Texas, if I'm not mistaken, something on that order. I come from a medical and science background. I'm an MD, I'm a PhD. I did virology research in a lab for 15 years. My approach to public policy is we have to come at everything from a science. We have to come at questions from a science perspective. If there's something we don't know, we have to go to the experts and ask, what's the best answer the science has to offer us right now. So in terms of reducing pollutants, what are the most harmful pollutants? How can we reduce them? What are the alternatives? And we've done this before with acid rain, or the CFCs that were putting a hole in the ozone layer. We banned CFCs and we fixed the problem. We got to do the same thing with carbon dioxide and methane emissions that are causing the climate crisis. We have to, believe in science. It's got a lot to offer us if we only listen and take it seriously.
Okay, Ricky Justiano Justin Iano. He asks, is it possible to maintain a private option in Medicare for all?
A private option? Well, so that's an interesting question. I'm not sure exactly what he means by that. I guess the option of buying private insurance. The hope is, the idea is with Medicare for all that it would be so comprehensive that there would be little to no need to buy any kind of supplemental insurance. I understand right now with Medicare as it exists, people often need to buy supplemental insurance. And some people I've talked to, there's a misunderstanding. They think Medicare for all will just take the existing Medicare program and expand it to everybody. But actually it's more than that, right? It's actually expanding, making full comprehensive benefits available to everybody, free at the point of service, so that they're, including vision, including hearing, including dental, including prescription drugs. So there really shouldn't be a need for additional private insurance. I suppose if I suppose if people wanted to purchase some, someone could try to sell it, but I don't think they'd have many customers. If we do a good job providing, public health insurance.
Margaret Elizabeth. Hey, Margaret. They're asking, since there is currently no federal ban on non-consensual surgery on intersex children, would you support an effort to prohibit these surgeries on a federal level?
No federal ban on non-consensual surgery on intersex children.
Mm-hmm.
This is a difficult issue. I think that I'm a parent, and I think there is a lot to be said for the idea of letting the biology of children stay in place when they are born. Currently no federal ban on non-consensual surgery. I mean, I would consider it. I think I'd have to learn more about it. I'd have to educate myself a little bit more about it. I know that there are it's impossible for a child to give consent. And I'm a parent. I know that my child had surgery and I gave consent when he had ear tubes put in. Of course, that's a very different, less life-altering surgery than the kind of surgeries you're talking about on people's reproductive organs and so forth. So but I would like to hear people's perspectives on the case for a ban. I'd be very open to hearing the case for a ban, and I can imagine that there's a good chance it would make sense to me. I just have to apologize. I'm not completely familiar, and I don't want to say one way or the other without having heard all the specifics.
Javard Parker is asking, does the Green Party recommend the 13th Amendment be amended to fully outlaw slavery and end prison labor for low wages?
I'm all for that. I can't speak for the Green Party as a whole, but I know that sounds like it makes a lot of sense to me. I know there's prison labor in California where they're out fighting wildfires for $1 an hour and ridiculous wages like that. And they're putting their lives at risk. And so, and then there's the issue of territories, and there's many citizens like in Samoa and where a lot of the same protections that we enjoy in the States don't necessarily extend to them. And I think we have to always remember them in our considerations too when we're talking about what our rights are. We have to remember that the U.S. has a lot of territories from our colonial past. We held on to the Philippines for a good 50 years after taking it from Spain in a war, and then fighting the Philippines to hold on, the Filipinos to hold on to it. But yes, absolutely. I think if an amendment to the Constitution is necessary to do that, then I'd be in favor of that.
Richard Pink asks, what is your take on this year's flu vaccine? And would you agree to be vaccinated by the first COVID-19 vaccine promoted by the Trump administration?
Coming from a science background, it's really been sad to see what's happened with Trump misrepresenting the science, and trying to sideline Dr. Anthony Fauci, and trying to put in his lackeys at the FDA, and really misguide people and misrepresent the science. And so it's sad because it's, people need to have faith in these public institutions that they're really looking out for the public health and the public interest. And they've worked, the people in these agencies have worked hard for years and they're highly trained. But when the White House comes in and strong arms them and puts in somebody at the top who's going to follow, toe the administration's line, it destroys credibility. Unfortunately, it shakes people's faith in can we believe what the FDA is saying anymore? Can we even trust the CDC anymore? And it's sad because we know now that there's a political pressure being put on them. So we have to, if there's a way to reduce political pressure from being applied on these agencies to make it less possible to do that, I'd be interested in that kind of idea. But in terms of the vaccines, they should be fully tested. A vaccine that hasn't gone through phase 3 trials, I wouldn't want to take. I'd be scared to take that. I mean, we need a vaccine desperately, but it's very important to go through phase 3 trials to really get an idea of if there are serious side effects to a vaccine. You want to make sure that it's safe, and you can't assume that. That's what you find out by doing trials. So in terms of the flu vaccine, I'm not familiar with the flu vaccine yet that's coming out this year. I get the flu vaccine every year. I know there's a small risk associated with it, but I take it in part to protect the public health because I don't want to be a vector that transmits influenza to a vulnerable person.
Aaron Hernandez Burleson is asking, what do you have to say about the movement to end the 40-hour work week?
Well, I'm not familiar with that movement. I know that the 40-hour work week is something that was won by the labor movement over many years and decades. So I can only imagine this is a movement to extend the work week. Is that correct? To do away with the 40-hour limitation on the work week? If so, I would be opposed to that. I can't.
I think it's the other way around. People
Oh,
want
really?
a reduction in the normal work week, usually with the maintenance of the pay.
Yes.
And then the question is, how do you make sure that pay is maintained? And if you put it on every business, they have different capacities to keep the pay. So you get, 30 hours work for 40 hours pay, which then brings up proposals to have a public system that sends a second check to people so that the productivity gains, which have now been taken by the capitalists, are socially distributed because it's the workers that are, doing the work that increases the productivity. So there's a guy named Andre Gortz in Europe, had a lot of proposals for that in the 80s and 90s. And it's kind of receded, but I think it's something we need to go back and look at. And I certainly support that because if you look at the charts, wages and productivity rose in tandem until about 1970 from the end of World War II. And since then, wages have been stagnant and productivity's continued on its upward bound. And that difference between what we produce and the labor we do has been taken by the owners of the enterprises. So we're so productive now. People say we could produce what we need, say in 30 hours with 30-hour work weeks, and then to maintain people's income, we need some kind of social program to distribute those productivity gains that don't go to the workers now. So that's what people talk about, and There hasn't been a focused movement. You know, the movement now is more to get the minimum wage up. You know, 15 is popular. We're calling for 20 in our campaign.
Yeah, well, whenever I talk about economics, I like to start by saying, you know, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that's an old piece of wisdom that people seem to have forgotten. You know, unless you do something about it, unless you do something, that's what happens. The rich will keep on getting richer and the poor will keep on getting poorer. Because when you have advantages, they compound. And when you have disadvantages, they compound. So I view it as the role of the government to do something about that. And that includes whether it be not just a safety net, but maybe a universal basic income. And of course, progressive taxation. You know, there's this radical idea that taxation is theft has become, you know, popular, at least in the Libertarian Party, but it's ever since Reagan. You know, this idea that you know there's something evil about taxation is problematic, because I do believe there, quite frankly, there is a redistributive responsibility that governments have, because in the absence of that, you will end up with stratified society and with a concentrated, powerful elite.
All right. I'm seeing any more questions being pitched your way. Thank you. And I've been reading the chat, and people have been very supportive of you. Missy Bell particularly appreciates the fact that you were very human about your answer, and willing to, you know, admit, hey, let me research this. People want authenticity, and so, you know, you getting high marks for that.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think what I've seen is pretty dope. So let the folks know how to find you.
Yeah, so my website is justinforall.org, like justinforall.org. And you can email me at info@justinforall.org. There it is. I also have a Facebook page, Justin for All, and Twitter, Justin for All 2. Justin for All without the 2 was already taken, and I couldn't get it. So it's Justin for All 2.
Well,
so I'm looking for support. I'd love to hear from anybody.
Well, thanks for coming on. I know Rosa DeLauro. I've been reading about her in Congress, and some of the liberal groups are promoting her as a progressive. But as you point out, she won't vote to cut the military. She won't be for Medicare for all. And you know, I wish you all the luck, and I hope you can, you know, be the first Green member of Congress in the United States.
Woohoo!
Canada's done it. The UK's done it. You know, it's our turn to get up in there. You know, even with the winner-take-all system, you know, we're in all the states where there's parliament, you know, countries where there's proportional representation. But we can still get some people up in there.
Well, thank you, Howie. I appreciate it. Yeah, proportional representation, ranked choice voting, I think are going to be real game changers. To have ranked choice voting in Maine this year, and I'm hoping it's going to become more and more popular. People are going to understand we don't have to live like this. We don't have to live with a spoiler effect. We can have a much more wide open democracy that's open to any number of parties and independents and different viewpoints.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being with us tonight. You know, you're getting a lot of love in the chat. So thank you for taking your time and letting the folks know who you are. So this is pretty awesome.
Thank you, guys. It's really a pleasure.
All right. Have a good evening. So now it's time for me and Angela to answer some questions.
We back on the hot seat.
All right.
You want to go or you want me to go?
I can go. Kristen Kaz Zuyus. Well, I'm probably butchering names tonight, but that's the best I could do. Howie and Angela, first of all, I love y'all and we'll vote for you. Thank you.
Hey, sugar.
My question is, what are your thoughts on sovereign immunity? Would you uphold that or work to remove it for yourselves and future presidents after you? Yeah, sovereign immunity means Trump can get away with all these crimes. And Robert Mueller, because actually it wasn't a law, it was a letter written back during Watergate saying a president couldn't be indicted for crimes. But in a democracy, nobody should have, immunity, sovereign immunity. I'd be for getting rid of that. And, if we do the crime, we're going to have to do the time. And that should apply to the president as well as the rest of us. So, yeah, sovereign immunity should go.
I completely concur. Hey, Lexi Hightail Dolan. What about people who say a vote green is a vote for Trump? Do you know how often we see this? I love the meme that's going around with the 3 little boxes, and you got the green box, and Howie does this really well. You got the green box, you got the blue box, and you got the red box. When you check the box, that's the box you get. And so, we try not to oversimplify with folks because we understand that there is a lot of very justified fear of retaining the individual who is currently occupying the White House. But a green vote is a green vote. A vote for them, the duopoly is a vote for those folks in the duopoly. They don't intersect. And for people who are giving you the business about supporting a third party, like Howie likes to say, and I absolutely love, turn it around on them. Particularly with Democrats, I've found that they have been the most virulent about this election. And just let them know it is not our fault that your party is throwing candidates at us that act like they can't hear us when we talk to them. We've asked for Medicare for all. We've asked for changes to the way that we're doing public education in this country to where it is benefiting, educators and strengthening, things we could be doing to strengthen it. People are asking for a Green New Deal, an eco-socialist Green New Deal. People are asking for a living wage above, a guaranteed income above poverty. All of these things that we're talking about. The Democrats are not offering these things. So why should I take my vote and encourage the people I love to take their vote and waste it on candidates who aren't going to give us what we want? You heard Justin say it earlier. Like, your vote is your leverage. And once you use your leverage, the people, if it's not in their policy to begin with, you have no way of swaying them one way or the other once you give them what you want. So don't waste your time. Vote for what you want. And Howie, I'll pitch that one to you.
Well, not only is a green vote not a Trump vote, it's a green vote. Duh. It's the strongest anti-Trump vote because Biden and Trump agree on the nuclear modernization program that has destabilized the nuclear balance of terror, that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, it's made them put their doomsday clock the closest it's ever been to midnight. They both oppose a Green New Deal. They both oppose Medicare for all. They both continue the endless wars. And I could go on and on and on. Now, I agree, Trump's probably worse because he's a stone cold racist. He's a childlike dummy that makes stuff up. I mean, now he's got little black dressed people, terrorists getting in a plane that doesn't exist, coming to get the police. I mean, the guy is out of his mind. And that's dangerous in the White House. He's got the nuclear codes. But, Mussolini was a lesser evil to Hitler. That doesn't mean I'm going to vote for Mussolini. They give us a terrible choice. We can be hung or we can be shot. The Green Party is your chance to escape. So don't vote for Biden to vote against Trump. Vote Green to vote against Trump, especially in a state. I'm in New York. Biden's been ahead by 24 points or more consistently all year. A vote for Biden is a wasted vote. It's also a vote for the Democrats' plan to kill the Green Party and get us off the ballot. The Democrats are suppressing the vote too, as I was saying earlier, by attacking parties. They're attacking Wisconsin native Angela Walker from being on the ballot in Wisconsin. In New York State, they've tripled the number of votes we need to get to stay on the ballot. And they've doubled the frequency. And if we lose the ballot, they've tripled the number of signatures we got to get to 45,000 in a 6-week window. which makes it one of the hardest states. And that's Andrew Cuomo. He's the guy that got it attached to the budget bill in April. And the New York Times put it on their headline, the Democrats' secret plan to kill third parties. You want to vote for that? You know, shame on you. If you're a progressive or a socialist, shame on you. Don't shame us. And the other thing I'll say is, you know, this voter suppression that we're so concerned about. Look back at 2016 in Detroit. The Democrats blamed Jill Stein for Clinton losing that election by 10,000 votes in Michigan. But you know, there's 75,000 votes in Detroit that were never counted because the Republican Secretary of State put broken scanners in those Detroit precincts, and they wouldn't go through scan machines, so they were set aside. And at the end of the day, they had more ballots than were counted by the scanners. And so the Greens sued to get them counted. And the Republican Secretary of State went to court and said, oh, there's a discrepancy between the number of signatures and the number of scans. Something fishy's here, don't count them. And of course, the Green argument was, that's why you should count them. And Clinton had lawyers there. And the judge asked them, well, do you have an opinion on this? And they said, oh, no, we're just observing. That's your Democratic Party. They didn't even fight Trump when they had a chance there in court. And they want to blame the Green Party. So shame on anybody that's a progressive or socialist that votes for the Democrats. You know, you want to vote against Trump, vote Green against Trump. Kristen Olson, question for Angela. Do you think there are steps the federal government should be taking to empower women, dismantle rape culture, and address domestic abuse in our country? Thank you.
Hey, Kristen. And before Howie says yes, which he says every show about you being possibly his cousin, we ain't gonna let that go. Absolutely. I believe that strengthening the Violence Against Women Act, and you know, I know that it came up for a revisit a few years ago. And if I'm not mistaken, I have to go over it because I don't have it in front of me. I haven't looked at VAWA in a minute. But I know that it was expanded I believe it was expanded to include particular protections for Indigenous women and girls, because there is an epidemic of the disappearances and murders in this country as well of Indigenous women and girls, and also expanded protections for our transgender sisters. So making sure that folks are, you know, that those protections that are being offered in VAWA cover a wider swath of folks. And of course, I mean, we have a problem with rape culture in this country. We have a problem with misogyny. We have a problem with trans misogyny. We have a problem with violence, period. And so I think that there is a whole lot that can be done around strengthening legislation to protect women, girls, femmes, non-binary folks, and that we are explicit in our protections for these folks, you know, one of whom is myself. So, you know, I have granddaughters, I have a daughter, I have a whole lot of folks across the rainbow that I love, and this is something that is very close to my heart. And so making sure that we are working to overturn rape culture in this country, working to overturn misogyny and these entrenched gender role beliefs that keep people, you know, stuck, that, you know, because you were born with certain equipment or are perceived to be a certain way, that you are subordinate to other folks. That needs to be overturned. And you can definitely rest assured that for me, that's personal and something that I would absolutely prioritize. Since you aimed that question at me, Kristen. So.
Strong Flower One, what are your thoughts on the new People's Party? Well, they got a long way to go, because getting on the ballot, building an organization, this group's been around since the Bernie campaign in 2016. And, you know, it's got a lot of buzz on the internet, but nothing on the ground. So we are open to working with them. We had a discussion with their leader, Nick Brana, and they didn't include us in their little convention this weekend, although some of the speakers did endorse us, which we appreciate. And I would say what happens after the election is for after the election. We need people to get out there and vote for us this election and show that there is an independent left. And we should at least get 1 million votes for socialism. That would be a first in American history. Eugene Debs came close a couple times, 1912, 1920. That's a benchmark very much within our reach. And that will say something with this new socialist movement that has rose up, particularly with young people. You know, socialism used to be a word that stopped discussions. Now it starts discussions. So I think we really just got to get through this election and come out the other end stronger than we went in. And then, you know, everybody interested in independent progressive politics needs to be talking to each other.
Yes.
So, you know, our attitude is our door is open to the People's Party. We'll see if they're open to us.
Jacob Krug, or if it's Krug, go on and correct me. I've been discussing with my parents. We are among those that wouldn't vote for anyone for president if there wasn't a Green Party option. I'm with you on that. Would you agree that abstention should be an option on a ballot? This way we could see the percentage of those that do not favor any candidate. You know what? I like that idea. Howie, what do you think about that?
Well, in some jurisdictions, some organizations, and possibly in some countries, they have a none of the above option. This is a big thing Ralph Nader pushes a lot. Been pushing it a long time, so that if none of the above, NOTA, as they call it, wins, you have to have a new election with new candidates. So you get somebody that the people actually support. And I think that would be a good reform. How it would work with proportional representation in legislative bodies is another question. But certainly for individual seats like mayors and governors and presidents, NOTA is a good idea. So that even if you do a ranked choice voting, if you get to the end and NOTA wins, then you got to have a new election. I think that gives the people the ability to reject what they're being offered, particularly in this two-party duopoly, where in most elections, more people, the non-voters win just about every election in this country because they're totally disgusted with the options. And even in 2016, when you know, our presidential vote's gone up a little bit in the 2000s, but 100 million people did not vote in 2016. They kind of voted with their feet, NOTA, none of the above. So yeah, I think that's a good reform.
Oh, is it you or me?
You can go ahead.
You gotta be jumping into stuff. Chris 110, are you in favor of, I saw this in the chat, are you in favor of reparations in the form of cash payments to American descendants? And I'm going to make a little edit here, baby. American descendants of enslaved people, because, you know, our folks, because words matter, our folks were brought here as free people. They were enslaved. They were not slaves. And so I want, you know, make that little tiny edit. And are we in favor of reparations in the form of cash payments to American descendants of enslaved people? Howie?
Well, yeah, I think we are. We're in favor, first of all, of HR 40, the commission to study reparations for African Americans, because African Americans need to be part of the discussion of, you know, in this commission, so they can say what they want as a form of reparations. Now, I think obviously with Black household wealth being 1/10 of white household wealth, one form of reparations should be some infusion of cash to these African American households. But if you just give money to people in a system of racial capitalism remains, the capitalists are going to end up with everybody's money. So that's why when the modern reparations movement was kicked off by James Forman when he took the Black Manifesto to Riverside Church in 1969 and asked the churches and synagogues to fund a Black land bank in the South to restore the land that USDA and racist governments in the South, they had stolen Black farmers' lands, destroyed Black communities. So they wanted a land bank. They wanted Black radio and TV stations and printing and publishing companies. And they wanted Black think tanks because they wanted to talk about how do we get beyond racial capitalism. So my personal opinion is that reparations should be a combination of individual and collective reparations. But I think the next step is that commission. So these issues can be discussed, testimony taken, people have studied it can provide their expert testimony, the people affected can talk about what they need. And while that commission goes on, and it shouldn't go on and on and on, it should be, done with all deliberate speed, as they said after Brown v. Board of Education. Maybe we won't go faster than that happened. The other thing I would say is the first thing we can do is this economic bill of rights that Angela and I are campaigning on. And that's really the promissory note that Martin Luther King talked about at the March on Washington in 1963 in his prepared remarks. The I have a dream part is something he'd said many times, and Mahalia Jackson, when he finished his prepared remarks, said, "Tell him about the dream, Martin." And then he went off on a dream, which is a beautiful dream. But he'd said, we've come here in his prepared remarks, we've come here with a promissory note to cash it in, and the government tells us there are insufficient funds. Well, we're here because we don't believe that. And so what they had as demands was what today we call a job guarantee. Medicare for all. Back then they called it national health insurance. A massive housing program. And a guaranteed income above poverty built into the tax structure. And that demand they put in the form of legislation to Congress called the Freedom Budget in 1966. And that war on poverty was lost on the war in Vietnam. So King then came out against the war and in Riverside Church, and then organized the Poor People's Campaign to go to Washington with a disruptive mass nonviolent civil disobedience, nonviolent action to force Congress to act. And unfortunately, he was assassinated before that happened. And part of their rationale, going back to the March on Washington with A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin and Michael Harrington and Martin Luther King and others, was that there was a white backlash mobilizing. Goldwater was mobilizing on the Republican side. The Dixiecrats were mobilizing on the Democratic side. A backlash to civil rights. And they decided, they analyzed that in order to undermine the white backlash among white working people, we got to lead a movement for everybody's economic human rights and make it a multiracial movement of the poor and the working people. And they figured that would work. But because we didn't get that economic bill of rights back then, the white backlash was not undermined. And now the white backlash is in the White House. And that's why this economic bill of rights is so important. We are in a situation now where people like Trump, all them Republicans, these racist politicians, right-wing media, they are blaming the hardships that people have, particularly white working class people, on immigrants, on Black people, on gay people. I mean, anybody that they can pick on, they pick on and blame. And that divides us as working people. And that's really the challenge of the moment. You bring back Biden, there's no economic bill of rights in him. No. And you get rid of Trump, but there are those racist forces which go back to the redeemers after the Civil War that killed Reconstruction with violent overthrow of Reconstruction governments. They'll still be there. And I think the good news is that they're a minority in the country. Republicans and their racist politics only get power because of gerrymandering and the Electoral College and Black voter suppression. And we can do something about that. But they are aging out. The country's changing demographically, and it's changing culturally. So hopefully this is their last stand. And the lost cause that these people that wave the Confederate flag talk about will be finally defeated. But we gotta provide for the economic needs of all the people, or these opportunistic racists are going to mobilize people on the basis of myths about, the people on their necks. These white people's necks are the bosses. It's not black people, it's not immigrants, it's not Muslims or whatever. And we need a movement that helps explain to these people that have got confused by these racists. So where did we start on this? The economic bill?
It was reparations.
Reparations. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm saying before we get to the reparations specifically for African Americans, we should fight for this economic bill of rights, the promissory note that King was talking about in 1963.
Okay.
Adam Jackson, and Angela's going to answer this because I just talked a lot. How can we work toward ensuring workers are paid a livable wage?
Codify it in the law. I mean, it's part of our policy. We understand that a $20 raising the wage to, and Howie does the hard economics on this stuff. So why you pitch that to me, I see you for that, but it's cool. Because I'm gonna go around the world and you're gonna end up answering it anyway. But it is our in our platform, the raising the minimum wage to $20, and we understand that when you adjust for inflation, it should be way more than that now. But bringing it up to $20, the call nationwide for I don't know how long it's been, for 15. Is a baseline for us. And what are the economics, because I don't have it sitting in front of me, Howie, to get us there?
Well, if you took the minimum wage we had in 1968 and adjusted for inflation and productivity, because that labor is producing more value than it did in 1968, it would be in the mid-20s. So $20 over the next few years, ramping up to $20, is reasonable. That's one way of looking at it. Another is, what do you need if you're working full time to support a family of three? That's about $40,000. If you look at these self-sufficiency budgets that different think tanks have put together. Well, full time at $20 an hour is $40,000 a year. So this is a baseline for a single mom and two kids, or even a couple with one kid, with one person working full time. So that's where we get $20. And then we want to index it to both inflation and productivity. I mean, it's ridiculous now. The federal minimum wage is $7.25. And for tip workers, it's like $2 an hour. I mean, I was driving with my campaign manager in Tennessee when the campaign first got started, and we got to a Waffle House at 2 a.m. and talked to this woman who was getting $2 an hour plus tips. But that Waffle House was deserted. We were the only people in it. And she's working the graveyard shift for $2 an hour. The average income of the bottom 50% of the income scale, those people average $18,000 a year. That's a poverty income. So $20 an hour is reasonable given how productive this country is and how hard its people work.
John Myrick, and this is for Howie. You say vote, and I saw this in the chat. You say voting green makes sense since in a state like New York, but what about a swing state like Pennsylvania? And I dare say Wisconsin.
Yeah, well, every state is a battleground state for the Green Party, because in every state, when we're fighting on the issues, we're fighting the Democrats as well as the Republicans. And some of you may know of Kali Akuno down in Jackson, Mississippi, with Cooperation Jackson. And we were talking about this one time, and he says, yeah, the Democrats want us to, stay out of the so-called battleground states like Pennsylvania. They want to make those states sacrifice zones. Pennsylvania, they're fracking the hell out of that state, building all kinds of pipelines. And the Democrats won't touch that issue. From the governor on down, Bernie Sanders supporters or Joe Biden supporters among elected officials, none of them have come out against fracking. It's the Green Party leading that fight. Or you go to the cities where the rent is too damn high and people are getting evicted. I mean, now we're in a real dangerous situation because of the COVID depression and people don't have the income to pay the rent and the eviction moratoriums are running out. A lot of people are going to be put on the street. But when we fight for affordable housing in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or Scranton or wherever, the Democrats are who we fight. They control these cities. And who's behind them? The Democratic machines in these cities are financed by the real estate industry. And they're not interested in affordable housing. They're interested in upscale housing. They're interested in gentrification and displacement and redevelopment of poor communities and just pushing the poor people out, even if they're pushed onto the street. So wherever we go, we're fighting the Democrats, and we're not going to let any state be sacrificed. So you should vote for what you want and make the politicians come to you. And like Justin was saying earlier, yeah, they're progressives in the Democratic Party, but without us out here, they get taken for granted. They got no power. They don't have much even when we're out here, but it's even worse. And then the whole political spectrum moves to the right because there's not a left putting real solutions to the serious problems we face out there. So that's what I say in the so-called battleground states. Yeah, it is a battleground, and that's why you need the Green Party, so you can fight. Otherwise, you're going to get slaughtered. If you rely on the Democrats, you're going to lose on the issues you care about. Abdul Malik Mikhail, Howie Angela, do you support the state of Israel? Which is a nuanced question with state in quotes. You want me to get started on that one?
It looks like you're ready to.
Well, because it's nuanced, there's a guy named Peter Beinart who considers himself a liberal Zionist who recently wrote a controversial essay saying what we need is a homeland for Jewish people, not necessarily a state. And that may be the only way Jews and Palestinians can live side by side in the former territory of Palestine. So rather than talk about the state of Israel, I want to talk about human rights. And the state of Israel is violating the human rights of Palestinians within the state of Israel and within the occupied territories. And that's got to stop. And whether the ultimate solution is a two-state solution or a one democratic state solution is really up to the people there. I think the role of the U.S. is to be a neutral broker, and we have not been, because we've given, really since the first Bush administration, total carte blanche to whatever Israel wants to do to the Palestinians with no consequences. And, Joe Biden is typical of that. He said he opposed the annexation of those West Bank settlements that Netanyahu was talking about earlier this year. But if Israel did it, there wouldn't be any consequences as far as Biden was concerned, like the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions. And I'm normally against sanctions, but I think there are times when an oppressed group asks for sanctions to support their struggle. That's what the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa did. And I was very involved in that movement back in the 70s and 80s. And now the Palestinian movement is asking for that. So I think, we need to provide consequence. What the National Palestinian BDS Committee is calling for now is for military reductions in military aid to Israel as a first step in BDS at this time, to send Israel a message that they can't just keep abusing Palestinian rights and stealing their land. So I guess going back to the state in quotes, if the Palestinians and the Israelis negotiate a two-state settlement, then there'd be a state of Israel. And if it was just and respected everybody's rights, I'm fine with that. But the bottom line is everybody's rights being protected and everybody's safety being protected. So you want to add to that, Angela?
No, thank you, which is why I kind of slid that to you, because I think that the nuances are something that that you are very well able to speak to. And also, I did a lot of talking last week, so I do not feel guilty about putting it on you this week. I'm just gonna say that.
Okay.
And I believe, because we are not seeing anything new happening over here, that we are finishing up. So, what you got to say, President?
Well, I was noticing in the chat, a number of people were talking about what 5% means. If we were to get 5% of the vote, and there's a lot of confusion about that. What it means is that we would be considered by the Federal Election Commission as a minor party. And they define minor parties, national parties, as 5% to 25% of the national popular vote. You get over 25%, then you're considered a major party. So if you reach that threshold of being a minor party, you get a prorated portion of the public funding, campaign funding grant for the next presidential election. So in the fall of 2024, the major parties would get, this year it's over $100 million. Now they don't take it because they're raising billions from the corporate interests, a lot of it dark money, which we can't trace, which is a whole nother discussion. Don't get me started, but Biden's taking it like Trump is, and he should have made it an issue and said, Trump's taking dirty dark money and I'm taking, at least you can see which corporate money I'm getting it from. It's a secret, at least it'd be transparent. But anyway, they don't take that 100 million because it's not enough for them. But if we, anywhere between 5 and 25%, we get a prorated portion of that 100 million or so. So it would be at least a prorated portion. If we just get over 5%, that's $20 million for the Green Party campaign in September and October of 2024. And that would, you know, boy, we'd be on TV. We would be a very different kind of situation than we are right now. I mean, on TV with paid advertising, we should be on, you know, earned media in the sense of them interviewing us, and they're not doing that. That's a whole nother question. So that's what it is. Now, in a lot of the states, in about 40 to 50 states, the percentage of the vote we get determines whether the Green Party has a ballot line for the next election cycle. But that's state by state. So in New Mexico, it's 0.5%. Most states are 1, 2, 3, or 5%. Kentucky and Alabama, it's 20%. And that's tough. But so 5% in Rhode Island, say, that gets a ballot line for us. That's what the threshold is there. New York, it's 2% now, and so forth. So I hope that clears that up. And so at this point, maybe I should turn it over to Angela to wrap it up. And, you know, thanks for listening. And everybody have a good evening and be safe in this COVID pandemic.
They got one more question that Shard WV put, and you know they good about this. Put trees by so you wouldn't miss it. So that's why I know we're done, but I'm gonna pitch that out there. Has the campaign been able to request an interview with TYT and Joe Rogan? And we've already given our thoughts on the MPP a little bit earlier, but I've seen this about, have we requested to be on TYT and Joe Rogan?
Yes, we're pursuing all those kind of outlets. I was on a TYT related podcast sometime this summer. It wasn't the Young Turk. It was, I guess, another Young Turk or one of their people. So yeah, we're trying to get on all of those, and we're available. So I think what people that support us can do is write to those outlets and say, hey, why aren't you covering Angela and Howie?
And since, you know, I'm gonna keep it brief because, like I said, y'all heard from me last week excessively. So just stay safe. And there's a lot of folks who are, you know, I've seen it in the chat that, you know, feeling a little discouraged because you don't see us in the places that you think we should be. at them on Twitter, let people know, write op-eds. We talked, stuff we talked about last week, reach out. Y'all have our emails, you have our, you know how to get in touch with the campaign, things like that. And just tell people. I think the biggest thing that we're dealing with, countrywide, in the communities that we're most interested in talking about, is that we're not being talked about. And people have been so conditioned to the duopoly that they think that that is the only thing available. And I think that, it doesn't have to be 10 million people tuning into us on here. We have you, and y'all are able to go and talk to people and make the case for this campaign in a way that we would be less effective at, because it's coming from you. You know why you support this campaign. You know what you're attracted to about these policies. And you're able to convey those things. So talk about it. Get people together for like an online watch party with these things like that. Y'all know we do this every Tuesday. So, it's not big media that the Democrats and Republicans get, and it is what it is. But we have you. And as far as we're concerned, that's everything. So let's work on getting the word out, any way that you know how to do it. And don't be discouraged. If we're not, you not. So, and have a good week.